I have, going on 7 years, July 28th, freedom from alcohol. And with that, a lot of freedom from depression and anxiety. My name is Melissa. So I was not raised in a Christian home. My parents did the best they could when it came to raising my brothers and me. They would go to various sporting events and sometimes outings such as Cedar Point, Kings Island, that kind of thing. My father had a very difficult and harsh temper and would not only use foul language, but regularly belittle not only my brothers and I, but also my mom while we were present. My mom worked days and Dad was swing shift for most of my life. My grandparents on my mother's side were our major caregivers. I only remember very good things about both sets of grandparents, whereas my parents both grew up with alcoholic fathers. Extended family, though, was very important as it was in the culture of that time. At age 5 and 6, the congregational church bus would come and pick up my cousin and I to go to Sunday school in town. I remember 2 churches in the town I grew up in, the other a Catholic church. The congregational church was neighbor to my aunt's parents, which is where we would go after Sunday school. My aunt would drink coffee and chat with her mom, and her dad would take us all on a ride on his golf cart. Whoever was unlucky enough to sit beside him, come to find out later in life, was the one that he molested. He would take my cousin and I down to a river that was across the street from his house. Both my cousin and I, and later finding out her cousin on her mom's side of the family, all had gone through this with none of us telling anyone, thinking it was an extremely shameful and awful thing that was only happening to each of us individually. We didn't know it was happening to each one of us until later in life. By the time I was in middle school, I had extremely low self-esteem for the reasons discussed and more. I remember being 132 pounds in high school and was regularly called fat, even by my father and my older brother. Thunder thighs was another name I went by in high school. At the age of 6, I was no longer the baby of the family due to another addition, my younger brother, Dan. By the time I was 9 years old, I was babysitting him all summer for roughly 8 hours a day as my parents both worked full-time. My childhood was very short, roughly 6 years. While my friends were having sleepovers and going to each other's houses in the summer to go swimming and riding bikes, etc., I was at home with my little brother. I think this not only had a negative impact on me, but also on him. Between the sexual abuse, the name-calling, and constant yelling and foul language in my household, I didn't think highly enough of myself to keep me and my body protected. I was raped at a party at a friend's house when I was a freshman, then date raped as a junior in high school. Never once did I tell anyone of these various occurrences, but my reputation took a huge hit. On the second occurrence, I remember there was so much blood that I felt that much more ashamed and attempted to clean the bedding. Weird the things we remember. When my older brother was in the military, he dealt with major depression, writing me often that he just couldn't continue to live. After one of these letters I received, his time was almost up and he was honorably discharged. As a senior in high school, I flew to California to help him and a friend drive home to Michigan. I was staying with his friends out there and yet another rape occurred. At this point, I just felt like a target. By the time I was 15, after having multiple babysitting jobs since I was 11, I was working at a store connected to a small restaurant. I babysat for the owner of the establishment. He and the restaurant manager, who also was a friend of our family, were having an affair. As I said previously, I'd regularly babysat for the owner and knew his wife well. The restaurant manager and owner were cocaine and alcohol abusers, even on the job. So that was my first experience with all of this. A couple other issues occurred during my employment at this establishment. One issue was that I helped obtain employment for a friend of mine from high school. He was an amazing friend, but didn't do well there and needed to be terminated. Then I had a friend watch the register for me one evening when she was visiting. I needed to walk to the playhouse in town to walk my younger brother back and take him home, because he was always in plays. The next morning at school, I received a phone call from my boss stating that over $200 had been missing from the register and he needed to talk with me ASAP because from the time I left from the business to the time I returned with my brother, the cash register had been opened 25 times. I was devastated, but did the legwork. My best friend told me that she decided to take the money to help a friend to have an abortion. I asked the friend's name, went to that friend's house, and was told that was totally untrue. After finding out this information, my boss and I went to meet with my best friend and her parents, and she admitted she stole the money. Her and her parents has never spoken to me again. When I turned 16, I continued to work this job, but also worked at McDonald's and at a local Shell gas station, making pizzas and working as a cashier. I would make pizzas on Friday night from 5 to 9, work from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. on Saturdays at all three jobs, and work 5 a.m. to 9 p.m. on Sundays. Other evenings, I would isolate myself in my bedroom, working on homework or listening to music, writing in journals, etc. Often, I would be criticized by my parents for spending too much time in my room. At a very young age, I was responsible to purchase quite a bit of my own school clothes, especially if it had a name brand on it. My parents purchased shoes, underwear, and socks for us, along with one or two outfits. Principle 2 says, earnestly believe that God exists, that I matter to him, and that he has the power to help me recover. Happy are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Matthew 5:4. So during and after graduating from high school, I could feel that there was something really missing in my life. God knew that, and God knew what that was and placed the perfect vector in my path. A Michigan State police trooper took me under his wing to help me find God and a wonderful church. Principle 3 states, consciously choose to commit all my life and will to Christ's care and control. Happy are the meek. I professed my faith and was baptized in the spring of the year I turned 18. After high school, I worked full-time at the district court in Pawpaw. If I wanted to go to college, I had to pay for it. My parents didn't help me with college and would not allow me to fill out FAFSA or any other paperwork to get a loan. I was the first in my family to move on to higher education. Shortly after starting my work in the district court, I met a man that would one day be my husband. I fell in love with him immediately, and I believe he also with me. He didn't know too much about my past, mainly because I repressed some of it and chose to suppress the areas that I played a part in. Since being married, we have moved numerous times for Dave's employment with the Michigan State Police. The last of our moves in August of 2016. We moved into his parents' farmhouse for a couple of reasons. One, we needed to be over in this area to help his parents. His mom had just broken her hip after a fall, and his dad was in a dementia unit. And 2, we own land in South Holland that we wanted to build on. And 3, we were ready to get settled into a new school for our daughter. A couple of things occurred with this move. One, when we moved, one of our sons left to live in Big Rapids, Michigan to go to college, and the other son wanted to finish his schooling and continue working and being with his friends in Lansing. This was extremely difficult for me. I'm a mom that was very intertwined in the lives of my children. Not a helicopter mom, but I wasn't afraid to ask and talk about anything, so we had a really good relationship. The other issue that was extremely difficult for me was that we were living in my in-laws' farmhouse that I said I'd never live in. It was extremely expensive to heat and always cold, and I'm not a cold person. The kitchen appliances were less than in working condition, so crock pot cooking was the only way I could provide a meal for my family. My mother-in-law's belongings were still everywhere in the house, and my sister-in-law's furniture was also in the living area because she wanted it to be protected due to her house being rented while she was in Lithuania as a missionary. Needless to say, the events of that year spiraled me into a very dark place where the evil one took hold. When we finally sold our house in Diamondale, in December of 2016, our family went to Florida for the holidays. Dave, my husband, went back early to move the remainder of our belongings to Saugatuck. Everything was pretty much packed. He just had to move all the big items. Within just a few months, my work at Inovalon Incorporated had become non-existent. I was a subcontractor for them. I resigned my position with them, and the depression sank in that much deeper. It was the middle of winter. I was always cold in my in-laws' old farmhouse. I wasn't working. living environment was not stellar, and the big one, I hadn't found a church yet. I had very few friends in the area and missed my 2 sons terribly. I was almost jealous of my husband Dave because he saw Luke almost every day at Ferris State where he taught, whereas I saw him roughly every 3 weeks or so for a day on the weekend. Matt, my middle son, was another story. He loved living in Lansing, loved his friends, and loved his work. Jessica, our youngest, started school at Saugatuck, and within the first week, she had changed for the worse. The evil one likes to work in all areas of your life when he has a hold of you. She had become defiant and disrespectful in that very short week. By the second week, we had her in a Christian school. I drove there at least twice a day, but otherwise doing nothing else. The days Dave drove her, I didn't get out of bed until I had to pick her up. Then we'd go back home and get back under the covers. Once in a while, I would go out and eat with Dave and Jessica when Jess would go with us. I learned very quickly that I was powerless over alcohol. The bartenders at my 2 favorite spots knew what I liked to drink and just kept them coming, and being a regular, they made my drinks very strong. Many people would buy drinks for me. I was spiraling very quickly. The first time I was pulled over for drunk driving, I was almost to our driveway. The trooper said there was a be on the lookout, or BOLO, for the same make, model, and color as my car, but it was a vehicle that was driving extremely poorly on a whole different area. I was never there. So when God was trying to talk to me during that time, I didn't listen. Would I learn from this? Of course not. I had my hand slapped by the judge and continued to go out and drink by myself. I never really thought going out to a bar by myself was a bad thing. I would always find someone to talk to. I enjoyed watching sports, and I would take work to do on the computer if there wasn't going to be anything that I enjoyed there. Soon, I would know what a second DUI meant. I left the bar, drove quite a while, and again was close to home, but HPD, Holland Police Department, observed me crossing the lane of traffic and proceeded to pull me over. It was the worst experience of my life. God placed an extremely arrogant police officer in my path, and that was the exact thing I needed to wake me up. It placed me in a position that there was no going through this DUI with any breaks or helps from anyone. The shame and guilt were enough to push me in the right direction. This is where I finally found my higher power once again. The song that kept going through my head as my head was resting against the cold cement wall of a holding cell of the Ottawa County Jail was Carrie Underwood's "Jesus Take the Wheel." Knowing my life was spiraling. This is where Principle 1 came into play for me. Realize I am not God. I admit that I am powerless to control my tendency to do the wrong thing, and that my life is unmanageable. Blessed are the poor in spirit, Matthew 5:3. After this DUI, things changed, not only with me not going out by myself to drink, but also inside my heart. I knew again that what was missing in my life, it was God. We hadn't found a church we were all happy with, so we would periodically go to a couple different churches in the area, but when we all walked through the doors of Central Wesleyan Church in Holland, and a wonderful lady welcomed us and made us feel as though we were home, we knew this was where we belonged, and God wanted us there. The first sermon we heard was about broken people, which I was extremely broken at the time, and Pastor Craig mentioned a program called Celebrate Recovery. That very next night, we went to CR, and it has been an intricate part of my recovery ever since. And this is where Principle 2 comes into play for me. Earnestly believe that God exists, that I matter to Him, and that He has the power to help me recover. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Matthew 5:4. Being in the sobriety treatment court, there were many meetings that I had to attend, but none that have furthered my recovery more than what CR has. I did meet many great people in all the avenues of recovery, from my probation officer, the judge, my counselor that was court-ordered, and even the field officers that interrupted my household to make me blow in a tube at all hours of the day and night. One of the difficulties of recovery is working through all the issues that arise out of the teaching, testimonies, and discussions that occur. A couple of these issues came out early on for me. One is the idea that I have had an eating disorder since I was 18, working out excessively and eating salad with only cheese added. That was my life for a very lengthy time, right up to the time I was pregnant with Luke and had preterm labor, and was advised to stay on the couch and not lift anything or even move more than going to the restroom. My husband wouldn't even allow me to go get the mail. So with the eating disorder comes binge eating for me, and then restricting. Attempting to totally avoid carbs as much as possible was at one time happening. When I am depressed, that is when I break out anything with carbs and or sugar and eat excessively. I'm working through these character defects, among many other hertz habits and hang-ups, and relinquishing them to my higher power and Father God. So I still have a long journey ahead, I hope. On July 28th of this year, I will have 7 years of freedom from alcohol. In most days, freedom from depression and anxiety. I am thoroughly committed to my recovery, and I know that if God remains in my life, meaning that I do not push him away, I will continue on this path, even though I may never be totally healed from my hurts, habits, and hang-ups. I am working through many of the above issues and am finding peace with the sexual abuse I was subjected to. I no longer have sent it deep down into my psyche. God has been working in and through me, healing my hurts, helping me to work on my character defects, and allowing me to address those items I believe are hang-ups, such as resenting my aunt for not believing her father molested me as a child. I do believe that he will always be the one that carries me, when at the end of my story, I only see one set of footprints in the sand. The changes in my life have been mainly due to Monday nights at Celebrate Recovery and God's will to act in my life. I've been enjoying Step 10 by volunteering in the tech area of CR and my church, leading drugs and alcohol share group for a period of time, sharing my testimony in various arenas, and leading numerous step studies. I also work in a nonprofit that houses women and children in chaos and in their addictions. Life is still hard, just with new hurdles daily, but I have realized that God is my purpose in this life, because I plan on being extremely happy in the next. Thanks for letting me share.